In the middle of the divorce hearing, my daughter stood up and said, "Your Honor, I have a secret that even my mom doesn't know." The entire courtroom fell silent. My name is Sarah. I am 36 years old this year. I once had a family that I thought would be with me until the end of my days. I had been married for 10 years and had a little girl named Lily. She is 7 years old. And that morning, I sat in a courtroom as the respondent in my own marriage's dissolution. The room was not large. But it was cold. The chill seeped up from the polished linoleum floors and radiated from the gazes fixed upon me. I sat up straight on the hard wooden bench, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap I was trying to keep them from shaking. Across a narrow aisle from me was Mark, my husband. He wore a sharp navy suit, his tie perfectly knotted, his posture rigid. From a distance, no one would ever guess that this man was in the process of suing his wife for divorce. I didn't dare look at him for long, just a fleeting glance before my eyes fell back to the floor. There's an old saying that to slander your spouse is to slander yourself. But in that moment, I finally understood. When someone no longer cares to protect their partner's dignity, all that advice becomes meaningless. The attorney from the opposing side stood up swiftly, his voice clear and devoid of emotion. He began with words that sounded familiar, yet stung like 1,000 needles. He stated that I was a wife with no economic contribution, a mother who was incompetent with finances, and a woman with an unstable emotional state that negatively impacted our child's psychology. Every word, every sentence was neatly arranged like a legal document, with no anger, no shouting, yet powerful enough to sink a person to the bottom of an abyss. My ears rang as I listened. My 10 years at home, raising our child, managing the household, waking up early and going to bed late, could apparently be summarized in 2 words: a freeloader. The lawyer continued with the petitioner's demands, asking the judge to grant Mark full custody of our child on the grounds that I had no stable income and was not materially capable enough to guarantee Lily's future. Meanwhile, the marital assets, according to their argument, were entirely the result of Mark's hard work and therefore needed to be divided fairly. Fairly? I almost laughed if my throat hadn't felt so tight. At that moment, I could feel the eyes of the people around me. Some were curious, some were sympathetic, and some were slowly shaking their heads. I didn't know what they were thinking. I only knew that I was being placed in a pre-made frame. The frame of a failed woman. When the judge asked for my statement, I stood up. My legs felt a little weak, but I forced myself to stand tall. My voice came out small, not trembling as I had imagined, but my heart was in turmoil. I said that I hoped the court would consider everything comprehensively, placing the child's best interests above all else. I said that I was not fighting for assets. I was only pleading to remain a mother. As I said that, I heard the sound of a chair shifting. Mark adjusted his arms on the table, his expression calm. He didn't look at me. It was as if my very presence was just another legal procedure that needed to be completed. Lily was not in the courtroom that day. But her name was mentioned more often than mine. Every time I heard my child's name, my chest tightened. I wondered, if my daughter understood everything that was happening, what would she think of her mother? The court was adjourned for a few minutes. I sat back down. The back of my shirt was soaked with sweat, I hadn't even realized. Outside, the Chicago sun was still shining brightly, the traffic still bustling. Only my life had come to a standstill in this stuffy room. People say a woman's fate depends on her husband. But that day, I finally understood that when a marriage shatters, it is often the woman who stands most naked in the face of the storm. Without protection, without a shield, all her sacrifices could be twisted into evidence against her. I took a deep breath. Whatever happened, I had to sit here until the end. Because I knew that somewhere out there, a child was waiting for her mother to come home. If it hadn't been for that morning in the courtroom, I might have still thought my marriage had just grown a little stale over time, not that it had reached the point of utter collapse. The 3-story brownstone on a quiet street in Lincoln Park was where I had lived for 10 years as a wife. When we first moved in, I cleaned every step of the staircase, hung every curtain with the enthusiasm of a woman who believed she had found her safe harbor. But in the months leading up to that hearing, in that very same house, I began to feel I no longer had a place. My mornings started long before my husband and child woke up. I prepared breakfast, ironed Lily's school uniform, and tidied up the house. It all unfolded like a routine, as quiet as an old wall clock that just keeps ticking. I tried to do everything quickly so as not to disturb anyone. Mark usually came downstairs in a hurry. He would drink his coffee quickly, sometimes just a sip, then put the cup down, frowning, and say, "The coffee's weak today." On other days, he would push the cup away, sighing softly, but loud enough for me to hear. I would just look down, apologize, and quietly brew another cup, even though in my heart I didn't understand what I had done wrong. Dinner was rarely a complete family affair. Even when it was, there were just the three of us at the table, each lost in our own world. I would try to ask about his day. He would answer with short, clipped responses, sometimes just a nod. When I was silent, he took it as me having an attitude. Only with Lily did a smile ever grace his face. He would ask if Lily had a good day at school, if her teacher praised her. Occasionally, he would stroke her hair, promising to take her out on the weekend. Every time I saw that, I was happy for my daughter, but my own heart felt heavy. That tenderness was no longer for me. There were nights when I would sit folding laundry in the bedroom, hearing the sound of my husband and daughter laughing from the living room. I tried to console myself. It's okay, as long as he still loves Lily, this family is still intact. But the longer it went on, the more I realized I was only fooling myself. Mark started getting easily irritated by small things. The house wasn't perfectly tidy, he would frown. I asked for his opinion on an expense, he would brush it off and say, I can't be bothered with the numbers. I tried to explain further, and he would accuse me of making things complicated. Slowly, I learned not to ask, not to speak, and not to hope. Outsiders saw our family as perfectly fine. A nice house, a sweet child. But only those on the inside knew just how cold that house had become. There were no big fights, no drama, just a long, suffocating silence. Once, I stood on the stairs, looking down at the living room where he sat engrossed in his phone. The screen's light illuminated a face that felt like a stranger's. It suddenly occurred to me that I was living with someone who had left this marriage long ago. They say if a husband and wife are in sync, they can cross an ocean. But when their hearts are no longer aligned, a single glass of water is enough to make it spill. I never expected that those seemingly ordinary days were the prelude to the massive storm that awaited me. Sitting in that 3-story house, there were nights I would stare at the ceiling and ask myself, when did I actually start to lose my voice? If I had to pick one moment, I would go back to a few months after I married Mark. At that time, I was still working. I still had a paycheck, work friends, and conversations over lunch. I worked as an administrative assistant at a small import firm in the Loop. My salary wasn't huge, but it was steady, enough to buy a new dress without thinking twice. I once believed that a husband and wife should support each other, but that each should also be able to stand on their own 2 feet. Mark, however, did not think the same way. He was 2 years older than me, working in construction. His job was incredibly demanding. He once said something to me that I still remember clearly, because his voice at the time was so warm. Why don't you just stay home? Let me be the one to provide. A woman shouldn't have to work so hard. Leave it all to me. It sounded like a form of affection, and at that time, it was exactly what I wanted to hear. I came from a small town in Iowa. My parents were farmers. I had moved to Chicago for work. I was always afraid of falling behind, afraid that my future children would lack for anything. Hearing my husband say, let me take care of it, I suddenly felt protected, as if I had been placed under a secure roof, safe from the rain. Then I became pregnant with Lily. The first few months were filled with severe morning sickness, frequent dizziness, and a complete loss of appetite. One time, while entering data, a sharp pain shot through my stomach, and I had to ask for permission to go home early. My manager didn't mind, but from the looks of my coworkers, I understood. Everyone was busy, everyone had deadlines. My leaving meant someone else had to pick up my slack. Mark began to more frequently suggest that I quit my job. Just stay home, take care of the pregnancy. It's a small office, the pay is just okay. Why force yourself? I tried to weakly refuse, saying I was still strong enough. He didn't get angry, just smiled faintly. You're so stubborn. After you give birth, who's going to watch the baby? You want to leave her with a stranger? I wouldn't be comfortable with that. The phrase I wouldn't be comfortable sounded like a concern, but strangely, it placed a responsibility on my shoulders. The responsibility of being a mother, according to his standards. I remember that night I told my mother back home about my plan to quit. My mother was silent for a moment, then said, well, honey, as long as he's a good man and treats you right, that's what matters most. Just make sure you always have a little something tucked away for yourself, just in case. Hearing that, my eyes welled up with tears. My parents often believed in fate, while at that time, I believed in love. And so, I quit my job. At first, I thought it was just temporary. After Lily was old enough, I would go back to work. But life doesn't always follow our beautiful plans. Lily was born and was incredibly attached to me. At night, she would cry, and I would hold her. She got sick, and I stayed up all night. She was teething and ran a fever, and I would tremble as I checked her temperature every hour. Mark would come home from work, see me disheveled with swollen eyes, and say half-jokingly, "See? There's no way you could handle this and a job. It's better you're at home." I would give a strained smile, but my heart was starting to feel a sense of dread. I was afraid that if I went back to work, I wouldn't be able to catch up. Afraid people would ask, "You've been out for so long, can you still do the work?" Afraid of becoming useless. A few months later, I tried looking for online work. Mark didn't forbid it directly. He just smirked. "What kind of work can you do from home? It won't amount to anything. Just take care of the child. Let me be the one to earn the money." The phrase, "let me take care of it," slowly became his go-to line. And I realized that every time he said it, I felt smaller. Not because he hit or yelled at me, but because he made me feel incapable of taking care of myself. By the time Lily turned 3, I had almost completely lost contact with my old work friends. The office group chat would occasionally pop up, but I was reluctant to open it. I was afraid to read about their promotions, their new cars, or their vacations. Meanwhile, I was just stuck in the kitchen. I tried to console myself. This was my choice. But there were moments, while washing dishes, seeing my hands wrinkled from the soap, I would suddenly remember that these hands once typed on a keyboard all day, once signed documents, once had a purpose. The worst part was about money. When we first married, we still discussed finances. After I quit my job, all expenses became his responsibility. At first, he gave me a set amount of money each month. Then it changed to me having to ask for every single expense. I understood that a family needed a budget, but the feeling of having to ask for money to buy milk for my own child made me feel like a freeloader. I began to choose silence. I rarely asked, rarely suggested, rarely shopped. I thought it would bring peace to our family. But the more peaceful it became, the more I felt like a shadow. And a shadow cannot argue, cannot fight back, and cannot demand justice. People say you can only talk about dignity on a full stomach. At that time, I was trying to protect my dignity as a wife and mother, but I had long ago surrendered the foundation of my life entirely to my husband. And when the day came that the person holding the key to that foundation said I had no contribution, I finally understood. The golden cage wasn't locked from the outside. It was locked from the moment I first believed the words, "Just stay home." That afternoon, the air was scorching. It was a classic Chicago summer day that felt like it was pouring honey onto the asphalt, making anyone who stepped outside feel their throat go dry. I was picking up Lily from the school gate. My daughter ran towards me, her 2 pigtails bouncing, her mouth chattering about the praise she got from her teacher for her neat handwriting. I knelt, adjusted her backpack straps, listening and nodding, trying to make my face look as normal as possible. By then, I was used to letting everything pass by quietly, including my own exhaustion. Just as we reached the end of our block, I saw a delivery man waiting in front of our gate. He was wearing a helmet, holding a clipboard, and asked for my full name, Sarah Johnson? "There's certified mail, please sign here." I was confused. Certified mail? I hadn't ordered anything. I thought quickly. Maybe a bill, a letter from the school, or a package from relatives back in Iowa. The man handed me a long, neatly sealed envelope. In the top corner was the printed name of a law firm. I held the envelope. My heart suddenly started to pound, like someone was knocking hard on my chest. My hands felt cold, despite the intense heat. Lily saw the envelope and asked innocently, "Mommy, what's that letter?" "A birthday invitation, honey." I forced a smile, stroking her head. "Yes, Mommy will look at it in a minute." Inside the house, I set Lily's bag on a chair and poured her a glass of water. She ran to her room to turn on the fan, while I stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the envelope for a long time, as if holding a foreign object I was afraid would explode if I touched it. I took the envelope to the dining table and used a pair of scissors to open it carefully. I had only opened a small slit when I saw the bold letters on the first page. Divorce petition. I thought my eyes were deceiving me. I blinked several times, reading it again. Still the same 2 words. Dropping like a heavy stone into a still pond, creating turmoil within me. The petitioner's name, Mark Johnson. I sank into a chair, my body limp. The wooden chair felt hard, but my back had no strength. My eyes scanned every line, and with each line, I grew colder. They wrote that I had no income, no financial contribution, and was wasteful. They wrote that I was emotional, cried often, and my psychological state was unstable, which was detrimental to the child's development. My vision blurred when I read the part where they requested full custody be granted to Mark. The most painful part was about the assets. They asked the court to rule that the house, savings, and other assets were the result of Mark's hard work and should be divided in his favor. The sentences were so neat, so professional, but they felt like razor blades slicing my skin. 10 years of raising our child, managing the kitchen, caring for both our parents. Staying up all night when our child was sick, none of it was mentioned. Nothing measured my sacrifice. There were only cold phrases, like did not produce economic value. I heard Lily's voice from her room. "Mommy, I changed my clothes. Did you make dinner?" I was jolted as if pulled from a nightmare. I quickly put the papers back in the envelope, hiding it under a newspaper on the table, as if doing so would make the problem disappear. I walked to the kitchen. My hands were trembling so much I could barely lift the lid off the pot. In the fridge, there was a little ground meat and some spinach. I made a simple soup, sautéing the meat while my heart continued to pound. Lily sat at the dining table, looked at me, and asked, "Mommy, why is your face so pale? Are you sick?" I tried to swallow and replied softly, "Mommy's just a little dizzy. You go ahead and eat." My little girl knew nothing. She ate while chattering about her day at school. As for me, every word she spoke sounded like it was coming from behind thick glass. I listened, terrified. Terrified that if I wavered even a little, tears would fall in front of her. After dinner, I cleared the dishes and took her to her room to do her homework. Only when Lily was focused on her writing did I dare to retrieve the envelope, reading it again, like a person forced to stare at their own wound. I called Mark. The phone rang and rang, unanswered. I sent a text. "Can you come home early? I need to talk." The message showed as delivered, then went silent, like a stone. I called again, still no answer. It was then that I realized this wasn't a momentary anger, not a threat of divorce like what often happens with other couples. This was something that had been meticulously prepared, with signatures, stamps, and sentences designed to ensnare me. I sat on the tiled floor next to the dining table, my back against the refrigerator. Inside the house, I could hear the whirring of the fan and the sound of Lily's pencil on paper. But my ears were ringing. They say a wife should follow her husband. But when the captain turns the ship and pushes you into the sea, you realize that you don't always get to choose your harbor. I had thought that by being patient, taking good care of our child, and preparing meals, our family would be at peace. I never imagined that this excessive peace was precisely when it became easiest for others to judge me. I quickly wiped the corner of my eye. Not because I was weak, but because I wouldn't allow myself to cry before I knew what to do. Lily was still in her room, and I was her mother. I stood up, straightened my back, put the papers in the deepest drawer, and closed it tightly. The chill in my body didn't go away. But something else began to rise, smoldering slowly like embers in ash, not immediately bursting into flame, but enough to keep me from collapsing. That night, I didn't cook anything special, just a bowl of spinach soup with ground meat and a scrambled egg for Lily. The most ordinary things, as if a simple dinner could set everything back on its course. After eating, Lily went to her room to do homework and take a shower. I tucked her into bed early, pulling the blanket up to her chest and stroking her hair. She yawned, her voice sleepy. "Mommy, will you take me to school tomorrow?" "Yes," I agreed very quietly, afraid that if my voice was any louder, my throat would break. Once her breathing was steady, I closed her door. Inside the house, only the ticking of the clock and the dim light from the kitchen remained. I sat on the edge of a chair. The envelope was now lying on the table, no longer hidden. I didn't know what I was waiting for. An apology, an explanation, or just to see clearly the face of the man I once called my husband. Around 9 p.m., the front door opened. The sound of a key. Then Mark walked in. He was home earlier than usual, not in a rush. His suit was still neat, his hair styled, the faint scent of men's cologne in the air. He glanced at me briefly, like seeing an object out of place in the living room. He placed his keys on the rack, took off his watch, and then asked very calmly, "Why are you sitting here? Is Lily asleep?" I stood up. My heart was pounding, but I tried to keep my voice from rising. "She's asleep. I need to talk to you." He saw the envelope on the table. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, almost a smile. He pulled out a chair and sat across from me, his hands placed on the table like someone preparing for a meeting. I pushed the envelope towards him. "What is this?" He didn't open it, just looked at me and said flatly, "Divorce papers." Those two words fell dryly, without hesitation. I still tried to ask, hoping it was all a misunderstanding. "Why did it come to this? You could have just talked to me." Mark leaned back and sighed, as if tired of having to explain the obvious. Because I can't live like this anymore. You're always gloomy, sensitive. You turn everything into a drama. I come home from work exhausted, and I still have to listen to your complaints. I bit my lip. I wanted to say, I'm gloomy because I'm lonely. I wanted to say, I'm sensitive because I've lived in silence for too long. But in front of his calm face, all those words sounded like begging. I asked again, my voice trembling slightly. So, the assets and Lily, what's your plan? He picked up the glass of water on the table, took a sip, and placed it back down very slowly, as if afraid of scratching the table's surface. My lawyer is handling it. You just need to sign so we can get this over with quickly. Hearing that, my head spun. Just sign. You're going to take everything, including Lily? Mark looked at me directly. For the first time, his voice was heavier, but it still sounded polite. You don't have an income at home. How are you going to raise a child? Do you think love is enough? A child needs a good environment, a good school, proper facilities. I can provide that. He went from calling me by my name, to just you. I fell silent. The way he changed his address felt more definitive than any legal document. I tried to lower my voice so it wouldn't reach Lily's room. You talk as if my 10 years at home raising our child meant nothing. I stayed home because you wanted me to. Mark frowned, then gave a cynical smile. Don't bring that up. Anyone can stay at home. Taking care of a child and cooking is a wife's duty. Earning money and building assets is my job. You can't use housework to demand rights. My face felt hot. Not from shame, but from humiliation. That sentence was like pouring ice water on my heart. I remembered the saying. A husband builds a house, a wife builds a home. But my home, in his eyes, was just something that was supposed to be there, not something to be valued. I asked slowly, each word pulled from deep within my chest. Then why did you marry me? So that when you got bored, you could say I was useless? Mark glanced at his watch, then at me, his patience wearing thin. I don't have time to debate feelings. I've made my decision. You sign, and I'll give you a sum of money to get you on your feet. Enough for you to rent a place for a while. Other than that, don't make a scene. Hearing the words "get you on your feet," my throat tightened. It turned out that 10 years of living together, giving birth to and raising his child, were ultimately valued as just a sum of money. Not a division, not a right, but a handout, like charity. I gripped the edge of the table to keep from crying. I didn't want to be the emotional woman they described, but hot tears still welled in my eyes. I said in a small but clear voice, have you ever thought about how much this will hurt Lily? She's our child. You can leave me, but you don't have the right to use our child to win or lose. Mark stood up, straightening his suit, as if about to leave the conversation. Don't be so moralistic. The child will live with whoever is better for her. I'll take care of everything. You just take care of yourself. After that, he walked past me, straight up the stairs, without a glance back, without asking if I was okay, without pausing for a second. The sound of his footsteps on the wooden stairs was steady and firm. I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, hearing the bedroom door close on the second floor. At that moment, I felt the house had become larger than usual, so large it felt cold. The cold wasn't from a draft, but from the realization that I had just been pushed out of my own life with words that were clean, logical, not harsh, but so cruel they sent a shiver down my spine. I looked at the envelope on the table. Still there, neat as a pre-written verdict. I touched its surface, my hand trembling. But then I reminded myself. Tears flow downward. There comes a time when a woman must dam them up and stand. If I don't want to be swept away. I walked slowly to Lily's room, and peeked through the crack in the door. My daughter was sleeping soundly, her face peaceful, unaware that her mother had just lost her footing. I closed the door very gently, then sat down at the dining table. For the first time in my life, I felt so small and cornered. But for the first time, I also understood. If I didn't stand up, the one who would be hurt the most was my daughter. That night, I barely slept. Not because I cried a lot, but because my mind was racing. I lay there listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the sound of the wind slipping through the window cracks, and I asked myself, what do I have left? Very early the next morning, while the sky was still dim, I got up and made oatmeal for Lily. My little girl was still cheerful, sitting and blowing on each spoonful of her oatmeal. Meanwhile, as I stirred the pot, I tried to keep my voice steady. Mark left earlier than usual that morning. He came down the stairs and only said, I have a meeting, then the door closed, short and cold, just like how he was cutting everything off. After dropping Lily at school, I didn't go straight home. I stopped at a small diner at the end of the street and ordered a bowl of chicken noodle soup. It tasted bland. The broth was fragrant, the celery was green, the crackers were crisp. Normally, I would have praised this soup, but that day, my mouth was chewing but my throat felt blocked. I opened my phone and went to my mobile banking app. I wanted to check our joint savings account, something that had been my security blanket for years. At least there were still funds for Lily. I didn't have a salary, but I had a habit of tracking expenses. I always used the money Mark gave me each month sparingly, trying to save a little bit here and there. I had once suggested we save regularly every month for Lily's emergency fund. Mark had agreed, but he held the primary card and usually made the transactions. I could only watch the balance in the app grow, and every time it did, my heart felt a little lighter. I tapped on the account menu. The screen loaded for a moment, and then a series of numbers appeared that I thought I had misread. Balance. 0. I blinked, logged out of the app, and logged back in. I closed the app and opened it again. I even pinched the back of my hand like a child to make sure this wasn't a dream. Still, 0. A cold dread crept up my spine. My hand started to shake. I scrolled to the transaction history and saw a series of transfers that had occurred in succession. Not once, but many times. Each time in a small, regular amount, like someone draining water from a tank without wanting to be noticed. There was a transaction from 3 months ago, one from a month ago, and even one from last week. I sat frozen in the middle of the diner. In front of me, the bowl of soup was still steaming. People were still coming and going. The clatter of plates and spoons sounded like it was coming from a very distant place. I called Mark. The line rang and then went dead. I called again, still no answer. The text I sent just showed a delivered status. Cold. I stood up, paid, and walked out. My legs felt like I was walking on cotton. My mind was blank, except for one sentence. I had to know what was really happening. I went straight to the nearest bank branch. The bank was cool, smelling of floor cleaner. I took a number and sat down to wait. My eyes were fixed on the flashing electronic screen. Every time a number changed, my heart pounded. When it was my turn, I walked to the teller. A friendly young woman. How can I help you, Boo Draket? Boo trying to speak clearly. Miss, could you please check this savings account? My app says the balance is 0. She entered my details, looked at her screen for a few seconds, then looked up. Her voice was still polite, but there was a cautious tone. I'm sorry, ma'am. This account has been closed. The funds were transferred out at the request of the account holder. I swallowed hard. Who is the account holder? This is a joint account. She looked at her screen again. It's in the name of Mr. Mark Johnson, ma'am. You are listed as a joint owner on the checking account, but this savings account was solely in his name. Hearing that, I felt like I had been slapped. All this time, I had seen the balance grow, thinking it belonged to both of us, but on paper, it wasn't mine. I clutched my purse tightly. Transferred where? When? Is there proof? The teller printed out a bank statement for me. The numbers lined up, day after day, month after month. The money had been transferred to another account. The recipient's name was also Mark Johnson, just at a different branch, a different type of account. I stared at the rows of numbers, remembering how calmly Mark had sat the night before, saying his lawyer was handling everything, as if it had all just begun. But no, this had started a long time ago. He had been preparing his exit, step by step, without haste, without a fuss. When he filed for divorce, all he had to do was give me a little push, and I would fall. I asked in a quiet voice, so what can I do? The teller looked sympathetic. I'm sorry, ma'am. If you want to file a complaint, you'll need to prove there's a dispute over the assets. The transactions themselves were all done according to procedure and were authenticated by the account holder. I nodded and said thank you. I held the bank statement with a cold hand. Walking out of the bank, the afternoon sun was blinding. I stood on the sidewalk, watching the bustling crowd, and suddenly felt so lost. What did I have right then? A phone, a bank statement, a few $100s in my wallet, and a child in school who depended on me completely. I remembered Mark's words from the night before. I'll give you a sum of money to get you on your feet. Now I understood its true meaning. He had cut off all my lifelines and then offered me a narrow escape route, so I wouldn't dare fight back. They say don't nurture a snake in your bosom. But I felt like someone who had willingly taken off her own protective jacket and handed it to someone else. From the day I believed the words, just stay home, let me take care of it, I had placed my entire security in one person's hands. And today, that same person was the one who pulled the chair out from under me, so smoothly, so neatly. Without a sound. I walked home. Each step felt heavier. Arriving at the gate, I looked up at the second-floor balcony where the pots of orchids I had once so carefully tended were basking in the sun. The house was still there, but I knew that if, on paper, everything was in his name, this house could also become a place from which I could be evicted at any moment. I went into my room, opened a drawer, and took out my expense notebook. The pages, filled with my handwriting, suddenly felt so meaningless. I flipped through them as if searching for a loophole, a handhold, or some proof of my hard work. But in the world of official papers and signatures, the hard work of a stay-at-home mother was sometimes lighter than a drop of ink. I sat down, took a deep breath, and forced myself to be calm. Crying now wouldn't solve anything. I needed a clear head. I needed to know what I could still fight for Lily. And most importantly, I had to learn to stand on my own 2 feet, even if these legs felt so weak. In my heart, a sentence repeated itself, quietly but firmly. Even if I have to starve, I must protect my child. My life's path now is my daughter. That afternoon, I picked Lily up from school earlier than usual. Not because I had free time, but because I was afraid. Afraid that if I was even a little late, someone else might have time to fill the void I was trying so desperately to protect for my daughter. While still in front of the school gate, I saw Mark. He had parked his car a few dozen yards away, wearing a white shirt. In his hand was a paper bag with the logo of a toy store. He was leaning against his car, looking relaxed, like a model father picking up his child. Anyone who saw him would probably tell me how lucky I was to have such an attentive husband. A cold feeling spread through my heart, but I kept walking closer, keeping my face as neutral as possible. Lily. As soon as she saw her father, her eyes lit up. She ran past me, shouting, "Daddy." Mark knelt, lifted Lily, and spun her around expertly, smiling. "Was Daddy's girl good at school today?" My daughter giggled, her arms wrapped around her father's neck. I stood nearby, clutching the strap of my bag, reminding myself to stay calm, not to get emotional. Mark put Lily down and then presented the paper bag to her like a magic trick. "Daddy has a present." Lily's eyes widened. Without even a glance at me, she was already reaching into the bag, pulling out a pink box. A new tablet. My heart pounded. My daughter had never been one to ask for much, but what little kid wouldn't be thrilled with a new gadget? Lily hugged the box, stammering. "Wow, this is so cool. Is this really for me?" Mark stroked her head, his voice as sweet as honey. "Daddy promised, didn't he? If you live with Daddy, he'll buy you even more things." He said it lightly, as if in passing. But I heard every word clearly. I looked at him, he was still smiling. His eyes were on Lily, not looking at me at all, as if my presence there was insignificant. I knelt, tidied Lily's collar, and whispered, "Say, thank you to Daddy." Lily whispered a thank you, and then hugged the box tightly, as if afraid someone would take it. She turned to me, her eyes shining. "Mommy, I have a new tablet." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yes, that's great." But my heart was not great at all. I knew this gift wasn't just a gift. It was a string. Adults pull it with logic, while children are pulled by pleasure. On the way home, Mark offered to take Lily for ice cream. I politely declined. "She has a bit of a cough today, it's not good for her to have ice cream." He shrugged. "It's fine, the important thing is that she's happy." Then he turned to Lily and whispered, "See? Mommy is always too worried. Living with Daddy is more fun." Lily didn't answer. Just looked down at her gift box. But I saw her lips purse slightly, as if she were recording that sentence. I suddenly understood something very bitter. People don't have to slander you directly. It's enough to plant seeds in a child's mind with phrases like, "Mommy worries too much, Mommy is strict, Mommy is often sad." That's enough to tarnish a mother's image. I didn't argue. I knew if I reacted right then, I would become the emotional woman they portrayed. I just said briefly, "She's still young. It's normal for me to worry." Mark gave a cynical smile. "Worry just enough. If you overdo it, the child gets tired of it too." He said it gently, but the words stabbed at my self-esteem. I'm not a person who likes to get angry. I'm just a mother who is afraid her child will lack for something, but that very fear was being turned into a burden. That night, after her bath, Lily ran to her room, busy unboxing her new tablet. She sat on the floor, carefully peeling off each layer of plastic as if holding a treasure. I stood in the doorway, watching her for a moment, feeling both pity and worry. When it was time for bed, I coaxed her into her bed. Lily hugged her new tablet, her eyes still shining. I had to remind her to put the tablet outside, that it wasn't good for her eyes. She complied, placing the tablet on her nightstand, then turned to the wall and pulled up her blanket. I thought she would fall asleep right away. But a moment later, she sat up again, reached under her pillow, and pulled something out. An old tablet, its screen cracked in the corner. I was stunned. I remembered that tablet was very old, from when Lily was in preschool. Mark had bought it for her to learn English. Then it got slow and the screen cracked. Mark had told me to throw it away. I thought I had stored it in the attic. Turns out it was under her pillow like a secret. I asked softly, "Why are you keeping this? You have a new, better one now." Lily looked startled and hugged the old tablet tightly, her eyes filled with panic. Then she shook her head. "I like this one. Mommy, don't ask." Her voice was small but firm. It felt even stranger. A 7-year-old rarely says, "Don't ask," unless something is scaring her. I sat on the edge of the bed, stroking her back, trying to soften my voice. "Mommy's just asking. If you like it, you can keep it. Mommy won't take it." Lily didn't look at me. She turned away, hugging the old tablet even tighter, as if embracing something precious, not for its value, but for its memories. I looked at her small back, my chest tight. "Lily," I called her very softly. She remained silent. A few moments later, she said in a voice like a sigh, "Mommy, don't be sad." Hearing that, my throat tightened. I didn't know what sadness she was talking about. I only knew that wasn't the sentence of a happy child. It was more like a reversed comfort. When a child senses their mother is about to break. I forced a smile. "Mommy's not sad. I just want you to sleep well." I turned off the main light, leaving only the dim, yellow nightlight. Lily lay still clutching the old tablet under her pillow. I went out, closing the door very quietly, then leaned against the hallway wall, taking a long, deep breath. They say blood is thicker than water. But sometimes it's the people you share blood with, who use that bond as a knife. Mark was luring Lily with things he could provide. As for me, if I could only pull her back with tears, I would lose. I looked towards Lily's room, my hands clenched. Not in anger at my daughter, but because I was beginning to understand. In Lily's heart, there was something bigger than just a gift. And she was trying to hide it in the clumsiest way. I stood there silently for a long time, then went to the kitchen, washed the dishes, did everything as usual, so the house wouldn't collapse from the sound of silence. But in my mind, the image of the old tablet under her pillow kept reappearing, like a small thorn that quietly reminded me that something was happening behind my back that I hadn't yet touched. After that night, I was even more hesitant to show my emotions in front of Lily. I continued to take her to school, cook for her, and smile when she showed me her test scores. But inside, I felt like I was walking on thin ice, afraid it would crack and break with every step. I needed someone to talk to. Someone who wouldn't judge, who wouldn't tell me to just be patient for the sake of the family, and who wouldn't turn my problems into gossip. After much thought, I remembered Jessica, my old friend from college. We were once very close, sharing a dorm room, splitting a pack of instant ramen at the end of the month. Life had made us drift apart, but I remembered Jessica as being outspoken and a fierce defender of women. I sent her a short text. "Jess, I'm in trouble. Can we meet for a bit?" Not even 5 minutes later, Jessica called. "Where?" "Just say the word. I'll be there." Her voice was still as fast and decisive as ever. Hearing it, I wanted to cry. We met at a diner near my old apartment complex. It was a busy Chicago afternoon. The smell of sizzling bacon mixed with the fragrant aroma of coffee. People were packed into booths, dipping fries in ketchup, eating freshly made burgers. I held a fork, but my hand was trembling so much I had to hide it under the table. When Jessica arrived and saw my face, she was shocked. "Oh my God, why are you so pale? What's wrong? Talk to me." I opened my mouth to speak, but my throat was tight. Finally, I could only manage to say, "Mark filed for divorce." Jessica slammed her iced tea glass on the table. "He's lost his mind." "What did you do to make him do something like that?" I shook my head. I didn't want to go into a long story in a crowded place. But I couldn't hold it in any longer. I briefly told her what I was facing. He was demanding sole custody, positioning me as a wife with no income, and claiming I made no contribution. I didn't dwell on the hurtful details. I just conveyed the most dangerous part. "He's trying to make me look like an unfit mother." Jessica's face hardened immediately. She said something that sent a shiver down my spine. "You know, this kind of move isn't impulsive. He has an advisor. He's building a narrative." I stared at Jessica. "A narrative?" Jessica nodded, her voice low. "Think about it. If he wants to win custody, he has to prove you're unstable and incapable. The more you cry, the more you panic, the more you react, the more ammunition you give him. Having help at the right time is invaluable. I'm not talking about money, I'm talking about the right person at the right time. You need a lawyer. I held my breath, feeling like someone had just pulled back a curtain in front of my eyes. I wasn't stupid, I had just been living in isolation for too long. So when I was attacked systematically, I was lost. Jessica took out her phone and called someone. Mr. Chen, it's Jessica. I have a friend who needs a divorce consultation. The situation is a bit complicated. Can we get an appointment? Then she turned to me. David Chen. He often helps women in weak positions. I can't promise a win, but at least we'll know the way forward. I looked at the plate of fries in front of me. Only now did I feel hungry. I ate a few to get some energy, but in my head, the words "building a narrative" kept echoing. It was true. Mark spoke so logically, as if all his actions were for the child's sake. If I had nothing to counter with, I would be swallowed whole. Mr. Chen's law office was in an old building. The staircase was a bit narrow, smelling of paper and coffee. Mr. Chen was in his 40s. Thin with sharp eyes, but his voice was calm. He shook my hand and said slowly, "Please sit down, Sarah. Just tell me everything in chronological order, as clearly as you can. I need facts. I don't need you to blame yourself." The sentence "I don't need you to blame yourself" made me feel a wave of relief. I had been blaming myself for too long. Blaming myself for not working, for not being assertive, for trusting someone. Hearing that, I finally dared to speak. I told him everything that had happened. Mr. Chen didn't interrupt much, only occasionally asking for details to clarify. When I got to the part where Mark was demanding custody because I had no income, he nodded slowly. This is a very common tactic. They use financial status as the sole measure of fitness. But the court doesn't just look at money. The court looks at the living environment, the time spent parenting, the emotional bond, and especially the child's psychological well-being. I said quietly, "But I really don't have a job, sir. I'm afraid I'll be seen as incapable." Mr. Chen looked me straight in the eye. Not having a job does not mean you lack capacity as a mother. What's more dangerous is that the opposing party is trying to paint you as unstable. They will collect trivial things and present them as evidence. Do you understand? The moment you cry, the moment you complain, the moment the house is a mess, they will capture it and use it. I shuddered. I couldn't remember how many times I had cried alone at night. I only knew that if someone wants to slander you, they just need to pick your worst moments. Mr. Chen gave clear instructions. First, from now on, you must remain calm in front of your child and husband. Second, save all messages, all calls related to the custody battle or threats. Third, you need to prove that you are the primary caregiver. School schedules, health records, report cards, who handles drop-offs and pickups, all of that is evidence. Don't underestimate the small things. Jessica, sitting beside me, kept nodding. I felt like I was being pulled out of a hole. I didn't feel immediate relief, but I could see a path. Mr. Chen took a sip of water and continued in a deeper voice. "Sarah, don't scare yourself. There's a saying, hard work pays off. But in law, effort must be accompanied by proof. You have love, but that love needs to be turned into something the court can see." I gave a sad smile. I thought being a mother was enough. He shook his head. In a dispute, people can turn your kindness into a weakness. The more patient you are, the more they think you're easy to push around. So, from now on, you can't just be passive. You must stand up, but with a clear mind. Hearing that, I almost laughed. Not out of joy, but because it felt so true. I had fallen down in silence too many times. This time, I couldn't fall. Jessica squeezed my hand gently. "See? Don't be afraid." I nodded. When I left his office, I realized it was already late afternoon. The sun was no longer scorching. A gentle breeze was blowing. I stood on the sidewalk, took a deep breath, and felt as if I was breathing with my own lungs for the first time, not borrowing someone else's. I still didn't know if I would win or lose, but I knew one thing for sure. Starting today, I was no longer walking in the dark. I had a friend holding my hand and a legal expert showing me the way. At least I stopped thinking I had to bear it all alone. After meeting with Mr. Chen, I forced myself to live more cautiously. Not in the sense of hiding something, but being careful in managing my emotions. I didn't allow myself to explode, and especially not to let Lily see me complain. They say fire tests gold, and adversity tests strength. At that time, I thought my greatest test was maintaining my composure. Meanwhile, My heart felt like it was being squeezed. Mark still came home, but his presence was like a shadow, a mere formality. He didn't ask what I was thinking, no longer argued. He just acted like someone who was certain of victory, moving with a casual confidence. In the morning, he would leave the house while I was still feeding Lily. At night, he would come home when Lily was already asleep, or just briefly stop by her room, place a gift on her nightstand, then go shower and shut himself in his room. Once, I overheard him talking on the phone on the balcony. His voice was low but firm. I couldn't hear the words clearly, only saw the way he hid in a dark corner as if afraid the house lights would expose him. At first, I blamed myself for being suspicious, but some things are obvious even without guessing. One night, he came home close to 11 p.m. I was in the kitchen, peeling fruit for the next morning. Hearing the door open, my heart pounded. He walked in, looking a bit tired, but his eyes had a strange glint. As he passed me, I caught a scent. It wasn't his usual soap, nor the smell of street exhaust. It was a sweet, sharp kind of perfume, the kind people wear to parties. I didn't ask. I just watched his back as he went up the stairs. The sound of his footsteps creaked on the wooden stairs. I usually didn't notice, but that night it sounded so clear, like a tapping in my head. The next morning, while I was folding Lily's clothes, a receipt fell out of Mark's jacket pocket. I wasn't snooping. The receipt just fell out as I lifted the jacket. A receipt from a cafe in Wicker Park. The payment time was late at night. I looked at the time, then put it back. My hand was a bit stiff. Wicker Park was far from our house. If he had a meeting, he would have said he was busy. If he met a client, he would usually boast about landing a new project. But that night, he had said nothing. Some might say, it's normal for a man to have his own affairs. I used to believe that too, but my situation was no longer normal. When someone has just filed for divorce and drained his wife's savings, everything normal becomes a question mark. What was more frightening was Lily. My daughter had been jumpy lately. At night, just the sound of a motorcycle passing by would wake her up, and she would pull her blanket tighter. Once, I heard her mumbling in her sleep, calling for me. I ran to her room. She opened her eyes wide, her breath coming in gasps, and she clung to my neck as if afraid I would disappear. I didn't press her. I remembered Mr. Chen's advice, don't pressure the child. I just stroked her back and whispered, Mommy's here, go back to sleep, sweetie. But the change in Lily wasn't just at night. During the day, she became more withdrawn. She would often daydream, even stopping mid-meal, to stare out the window. If I asked what she was thinking about, she would quickly answer, nothing. Then she would look down, avoiding my gaze. A 7-year-old is usually not a good liar, but Lily's clumsy lies made me even sadder. One afternoon when I picked her up, I saw Mark waiting at the end of the block. He didn't come to the house, just stood there holding a bag of cookies. He called out to Lily, stroking her head with that same sweet voice. Lily, come here, Daddy wants to talk. I slowed down, not interfering. I stood a few yards away, close enough to overhear. Mark said, do you love Daddy? Lily nodded. Love Mommy? Lily nodded again. He smiled and then continued lightly. Then you have to be a good girl. Don't make Mommy sad anymore. Mommy is often sad, cries a lot. If you're near Mommy, she'll just cry more. If you live with Daddy, then Mommy won't be sad anymore. I stood frozen. He wasn't badmouthing me directly. He was wrapping his poison in gift paper. For Mommy's sake. If Lily believed him, she would think that leaving her mother was a way of loving her. A child who loves her mother is easily trapped by her own affection. Lily held the bag of cookies, silent. She didn't refuse, nor did she agree. But I saw her hand gripping the bag tightly, as if trying to stop it from trembling. That night, as I was preparing dinner, Mark suddenly joined us at the table. He ate a few bites, then put down his fork and turned to Lily. This weekend, Daddy will take you to the toy store. Buy you that Lego set you like. Would you rather live with Daddy or with Mommy? The question sounded like a joke, but it wasn't. It was a needle pricked into a child's psyche, forcing her to choose a side. Lily looked at me, then at her father. Her lips pursed, her voice small. I want to live with Mommy. Mark raised an eyebrow, a faint smile on his lips. Live with Mommy? Can Mommy buy you Legos? I placed the bowl of vegetables on the table, a little harder than usual. I wanted to say, you can't talk to a child like that. I wanted to remind him that Lily was a child, not a trump card, but I swallowed the words back. I kept my face flat. I just looked at Lily and said gently, eat first, honey. Adult matters are for adults to discuss. Lily looked down, her eyes red. Mark didn't stop. He continued casually, as if giving a lecture. Daddy just wants you to have a good future. Your mother is too weak. You'll have a hard life with her. Too weak. I heard those two words. And my heart burned. So, in his eyes, my patience was a weakness, while his calculations were a strength. There's a saying, the soft are conquered, the hard are broken. I had been soft for too long, so now they thought it was the only way I knew how to be. I cleared the plates, took Lily to her room to do her homework. As she sat at her desk, I noticed how tense her back was. I stood behind her, placed my hands on her shoulders, and felt the tension in her small body. I asked very softly, Lily, did what Daddy say scare you? She shook her head quickly. No, I'm not scared. But her eyes wouldn't meet mine. I didn't push her further. I just took her pencil, sharpened it, and sat beside her, pretending to read a book. I wanted her to know that I was there, that I wasn't going anywhere. At her age, a sense of security is sometimes more important than any explanation. That night, after the lights were out, I heard Mark's phone vibrate softly upstairs. A short vibration, then silence. A few moments later, it vibrated again. I lay there staring at the ceiling, not going upstairs. I reminded myself. Don't speculate without proof. But my heart wasn't made of stone, it still ached. Ached because that man was using the purest things to make me look dirty. Using money to prove I was incapable. Using sweet words to make our child doubt her mother. Using his calmness to make me look crazy. I turned to look at a sleeping Lily. Her breathing was steady. Her eyelashes damp as if she had just been crying in a dream. I pulled the blanket up for her, touched her forehead gently, and then pulled my hand back. In my heart, I heard a piece of advice from my grandmother long ago. The scariest thing in this world is a person's changed heart. It's true. A changed heart can make a home feel like a foreign land. I knew that if there really was a woman behind that late-night call and that strange perfume, this was no longer just a divorce. It was a power struggle where I was being discarded like a used object. And what made my blood run cold was the feeling that Lily knew more than I thought. She was no longer the cheerful girl she used to be. She was holding a secret in her heart, like carrying a stone in her pocket, small, but heavy enough to pull her under. I no longer dared to ask Lily many questions, afraid that if I asked the wrong one, she would shut the door to her heart completely. But some things, even if adults try to avoid them, will find their own way out, like water seeping through cracks in the tile. That night, the wind blew hard. Chicago was in a dry spell. The wind slipped through the window gaps, creating a whispering sound. Lily had just finished her bath, her hair still damp. She was sitting on her bed, looking at a storybook. I took a dry towel and gently dried her hair, making small talk to help her relax. I'll make you that squash soup tomorrow, okay? You like that, right? Lily nodded, but her gaze was distant. When it was time for bed, I turned off the main light, leaving only the dim yellow nightlight. She lay on her side, pulling the blanket up high. I leaned down and kissed her forehead. She didn't pull away, but she didn't smile like she used to. I closed her door, my heart heavy. I walked to the living room to fold some of her clothes. Suddenly, I remembered the old tablet she had hidden. That object was like a small thorn that, while not immediately drawing blood, made it impossible for me to forget. I had no intention of snooping through her things, nor did I want to break her trust. I just wanted to understand what she was afraid of. I opened her door very quietly. Lily was asleep, her breathing steady, her cheeks flushed. Under her pillow, I saw the corner of the old tablet peeking out. I hesitated for a moment, then told myself, just a look, nothing more. I carefully pulled the tablet out and placed it in my palm. It felt heavier than I expected. The screen was cracked in the corner but was clean, as if often wiped. I walked out to the living room, sat on the sofa, and turned it on. The screen lit up slowly. I was about to turn it off again, afraid Lily would wake up, but a notification popped up. A blue folder icon. The name was short, not a game or a lesson, just a single letter. M. I frowned. Curiosity is an instinct, but for me at that moment, curiosity came with a heavy dose of worry. I touched the folder, and it asked for a password. I froze. A 7-year-old setting a password meant she was desperate to hide its contents. Before I could do anything, I heard the sound of a bedroom door opening from behind me. Click. I turned my head. Lily was standing in the doorway, her hair messy, her eyes wide. She was staring at the tablet in my hand. Her face was pale, as if she had seen a ghost. Mommy, what are you doing? Her voice trembled, not with anger, but with panic. She ran towards me faster than I expected, snatched the tablet, and clutched it to her chest. I was stunned. I had never seen her react like that. I quickly lowered my voice, afraid of making her panic more. "I'm sorry, sweetie, I was just worried this old tablet would hurt your hand. I didn't mean to." Lily shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. "Don't open it, Mommy. Don't open it. Please." My heart ached. I gently held her shoulders, trying to stay calm as Mr. Chen had advised. "I won't open it again. I promise," I said slowly. "But look at me, what are you so afraid of? Please tell Mommy." Lily was still hugging the tablet, her shoulders shaking. She didn't answer right away, just looked down and sobbed. I pulled her to sit beside me, wrapping a blanket around her as if to give her a sense of security. After a long time, she finally spoke, her voice hoarse. "I recorded it." I frowned. "Recorded what?" Lily bit her lip. "I recorded. Daddy." I felt a cold wind pierce me from my neck down to my spine. I tried to keep my expression neutral, afraid of scaring Lily even more. I just asked softly, "What was Daddy doing that you recorded?" Lily spoke in broken sentences. "That night. I woke up thirsty. I went outside. Daddy wasn't in his room. I looked for him." She paused, swallowing hard. "I saw Daddy in the living room, talking to a lady. I didn't hear everything, but I heard my name. I got scared. I hid behind the sofa, turned on the recording, and I didn't even dare to breathe." Hearing that, my entire body went rigid. A 7-year-old child, hiding behind a sofa, holding her breath while recording a video. Just imagining it made my heart hurt. I asked, still trying to keep my voice normal, "Did you see the lady's face?" Lily shook her head. "I only saw her hair and her red purse. She talked quietly, but I heard Daddy." She sobbed again. I wiped her tears, my own hands feeling cold. "What did Daddy say?" "Sweetie?" Lily looked up, her eyes red, but she tried to speak clearly. "Daddy said that I would have to live with him. Daddy said Mommy doesn't have any money, so Mommy isn't allowed to take care of me. That lady also said that I would only be able to see Mommy sometimes." Hearing that, I felt like I was being choked. If this was true, this was no longer just a marital dispute. This was a plan, and the most terrifying part was that my daughter was placed right in the middle of it. I took a deep breath, forcing myself not to cry. I pulled Lily into my arms, holding her tightly but not so much that it was suffocating. "You did nothing wrong, sweetie. You were just scared and trying to protect yourself. Thank you." Lily cried her heart out, hiding her face in my shirt. I was afraid Mommy would be sad, afraid Mommy would cry. I hid this so Mommy wouldn't get hurt. Hearing that, my own tears almost spilled. My little girl, in the middle of an adult battle, had to learn to hide things to protect her mother. Life is like that. If you love your child too much, the child suffers. If you love yourself too much, you're the one who gets hurt. But I couldn't let her suffer any longer. I stroked her hair and said very softly, "Mommy might be sad, but Mommy won't break. I'm your mom, after all. Remember, when we're scared, we hold hands." Lily nodded hard, her tears still flowing. I didn't ask any more about the video. I didn't force her to open it. I knew if I rushed, she would feel like she was being pulled back into that terrifying night. I just said, "You keep the tablet. But promise Mommy, from now on, if anything happens, you tell Mommy, okay? Mommy won't be mad. Mommy won't leave you." Lily hugged her old tablet and nodded again. She leaned against my shoulder, her breathing slowly becoming regular. I carried her back to bed, tucked her in, and sat beside her until she was fast asleep. That night, I sat in the living room for a very long time. I didn't watch the video. I just stared at my reflection in the dark television screen. In the silence, a thought emerged, cold and clear. Mark was doing everything to make me lose. And Lily, my little girl, had unintentionally held onto the one thing that adults fear most. The truth. I placed a hand on my chest, feeling my heart still pounding. I knew that from this moment on, I could no longer be passive. Because when they start targeting your child, patience is no longer a virtue. It's a trap. The next morning, I took Lily to school. As usual, I tied her hair in pigtails, straightened her collar, and reminded her to finish her lunch. But I did it all like a robot. In my mind, there was only one thing. The old tablet in my bag felt as heavy as a stone. Before she got out of my old sedan, Lily looked at me and asked quietly, "Mommy, are you mad at me?" I bent down, gave her a tight hug for a moment, and then said firmly, "Mommy is not mad. Mommy loves you." She nodded, but her eyes still looked anxious. I watched her run through the school gates, my heart aching. My daughter had done something a child should never have to do, and it was my job to turn it into her protection, not another wound. I didn't go straight home. I called Mr. Chen. "Sir, I have something very important," I whispered, as if afraid even the wind could hear. He answered calmly. "Sarah, where are you? Can you come to the office this morning?" I arrived at his office before noon. I hadn't eaten or drunk anything. My stomach was empty but felt like it was on fire. Mr. Chen offered me a seat and a glass of warm water. He didn't ask many questions, one look at me and he knew I was on edge. I took out the tablet and placed it on his desk. Lily recorded this. She said her father was talking about taking custody. Mr. Chen wasn't hasty, nor did he look excited. He just nodded steadily. "Stay calm, Sarah. We will look at it, but in a way that won't make you lose control. Just sit here." He put on a pair of earphones, connected them to the tablet, and operated it very slowly. I sat across from him, my hands clasped together. My nails dug into my skin until it hurt. When the screen lit up, I felt my heart pound so hard. The video started, the image a little shaky. The lighting was dim, the angle low, classic footage from a small child in hiding. On the screen, I saw a part of our living room, the place I once thought was the safest on earth. Then the voice came through. Even before his face appeared, I recognized Mark's voice, clear and unscripted. "I've prepared all the documents. My lawyer is confident the child has to come with me. That's the condition for everything to go smoothly." Hearing that, my throat tightened. "The child has to come with me." As if talking about an object, a woman's voice interjected, a bit sharp and clipped. I couldn't see her face, just her shadow, and her long hair. "I don't care how the court decides. I just need you to guarantee one thing: after the divorce, that child is with you, and that woman is cut off completely. Don't let her hang around." The blood drained from my face. That woman. So in their mouths, I was just a pronoun. Mark replied with a calmness that was chilling. "Don't worry, she has no money, she won't be able to afford a lawyer. I'm going to prove she has psychological issues. Just be patient for a few more weeks." Mr. Chen frowned slightly. I sat there, petrified. The woman laughed softly, a cold laugh. "Psychological issues? How are you going to do that?" Mark explained as if discussing a work project. "Easy. Just collect a few recordings of her crying, some photos of the house being messy, and then make people believe she can't control herself. If necessary, I'll have Lily say her mother gets angry a lot. A little kid says it, who wouldn't believe it?" Hearing that sentence, I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I never imagined a father could use his own child as a tool. The woman continued, "Visitation limited to once a month, and even then, it has to be supervised. I don't want her catching her mother's weakness." Every word fell like a stone. I suddenly understood why Lily had clutched that old tablet under her pillow. Because hearing all that, she was terrified. She didn't know what to hold on to, except her own recording. The video continued, but I couldn't bear to listen anymore. I covered my mouth, trying to stifle a sob. Hot tears streamed down my face, but I wouldn't let myself break down. Mr. Chen immediately stopped the video when he saw me shaking. He pushed the glass of water towards me. "Drink, ma'am." I held the glass with a trembling hand. I looked at Mr. Chen, my voice hoarse. "Did you hear that? They're planning to frame me." He nodded firmly. "Yes. And more importantly, this isn't just about an affair. This is intent to fabricate false evidence to win custody." I asked again. "Can this video be used, sir? I'm afraid they'll say it's fake." He looked at the screen, then at me. "We will proceed according to protocol. First, save the original file. Second, make copies. Third, if necessary, we will request a digital forensic analysis to prove its authenticity. Do not send this to anyone. Do not post it on social media. The moment they know you have this, they will find a way to destroy it." I nodded, but my mind was still in a turmoil. "I can't believe he could do this." Mr. Chen said slowly, "Sarah, there's a saying, you can know a person's face, but not their heart. Many people can act very well, but this video shows his true nature." I wiped my tears, trying to ask the most important question. "What should I do now?" He leaned forward and explained in detail. "You must act normally at home. Don't let him suspect anything. Keep taking care of your child, carry on with your usual activities, and do not confront him directly. In the meantime, start preparing evidence that you are the primary caregiver. Report cards, health records, immunization schedules, who handles school runs, even a letter from her teacher if needed. We will bring this video out at the right moment. Too soon, and they can still wriggle out of it. Hearing that, I shivered. It meant I had to pretend to know nothing in front of the man who had just uttered those cruel words, in my own home. I looked down, my voice soft. I'm afraid I can't act. Mr. Chin looked me straight in the eye. You don't have to be a great actor. You just need to not explode. Because if you explode, they will use it as their proof. Do you understand? Every time you successfully hold back your anger, you are protecting Lily. I took a deep breath. I remembered Lily. Clutching the old tablet, crying and pleading, "Mommy, don't be sad." My daughter was trying to be strong for me, so I had no right to be weak for myself. I stood up, bowed my head in gratitude to Mr. Chen. Before I left, he added, "Sarah, remember, what you need is not a victory over your husband. What you need is to keep your child safe and protect your dignity. He who sows the wind will reap the whirlwind. But the storm must come at the right time to topple them." I carried the tablet out of his office. On the street, the traffic was still heavy. People were busy with their own lives. Only I was walking, feeling as if I had just crossed a threshold. From this day forward, I was no longer a woman who could only surrender. I had seen the face of evil clearly, and that evil was targeting my daughter. I made a promise to myself, like an oath. To love my child means I have to be strong. Strong, so she will never have to record another video. Strong so that those deceitful people will not become our destiny. Leaving Mr. Chen's office, I didn't go straight home. I stopped at a small copy shop, the kind with an old-fashioned sign. Inside, the smell of paper mixed with the scent of ink. The owner, an older woman, sat fanning herself while watching a soap opera. I handed her a few bank statements and other documents I had brought. "Ma'am, could you make 2 copies of these, please?" Holding the stack of still warm papers, my heart felt a little calmer. I used to think evidence was something big. It turns out, it starts with small things like this. I continued on to the pediatrician's office where Lily got her immunizations. The nurse there recognized me and smiled. "Oh, Sarah, how's Lily doing?" I smiled back. "She's great, thank you." I was wondering if I could get a copy of her immunization schedule and her last few visit records, for my files. The nurse didn't ask many questions. While I waited, I sat on a bench. Watching other mothers holding their babies, hearing the cries of children, my eyes suddenly felt hot. I remembered Lily having to hide behind the sofa. But I quickly wiped them away. Mr. Chen had told me, from now on, calm is a discipline. That afternoon, I bought Lily chocolate pudding and a small cupcake, her favorite treats, as a way to bring her back to a state of normalcy. I didn't want her to think something dire was happening at home. When I picked her up, Lily ran out. Still a bit hesitant, but her eyes lit up when she saw the food. "Mommy, you bought this for me?" I nodded. "Yes, because you're a good girl." Lily ate her pudding and then asked, "Mommy, did you look at the tablet yesterday?" I knew she was worried. I pulled the car over under a tree and looked at her carefully. "Mommy knows now, but Mommy doesn't blame you. Listen to Mommy, okay? If anyone asks you about grown-up stuff, you just tell them what you saw and heard. Don't make things up. And don't exaggerate. Can you do that?" Lily nodded. She asked again, her voice very small. "If I say that, will Daddy be mad?" I paused for a moment. I didn't want to plant more fear. Whether Daddy gets mad or not is Daddy's problem. The important thing is that you did the right thing. Lily looked at me as if she wanted to believe me but was still unsure. I held her hand. "Mommy's right here." When we got home, I cooked dinner as usual. A hearty beef stew and some freshly baked cornbread. The aroma filled the house. I deliberately maintained this routine because I knew that people with devious plans are most afraid of unexpected changes. The more normal I acted, the harder it would be for Mark to guess what I was up to. Mark came home around 8 p.m. He walked through the living room, saw me setting the table, and just asked, "Has Lily eaten?" I replied flatly, "Yes, she's doing her homework." He just grunted. Then washed his hands and sat down to eat a few bites. I didn't ask where he had been. I didn't bring up the divorce, nor the money. I let everything remain as calm as the surface of a pond, even though I knew I was holding back a storm underneath. Halfway through his meal, his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen quickly, then stood up and walked to the balcony to answer. The glass door slid shut, leaving only a muffled sound. I glanced at him, then quickly looked away, pretending not to care. In my heart, I just reminded myself. A barking dog doesn't bite, but a quiet person is more dangerous. I had to be quiet in the right way. After he went upstairs, I went into my room, locked the door, and took out the old tablet. I didn't watch the video. I just did what Mr. Chen had advised, make a copy. I connected it to my old laptop, waiting patiently. When it was done, I copied it again to a small black USB drive. I named the file School Documents. It sounded ordinary, but I knew it held something that could save us. I hid it in my sewing box, under spools of thread and pins. I chose that spot because Mark would never touch it. The next day, I made time to meet with Lily's teacher. I didn't share personal problems, just said, "Mrs. Davis, Lily has been a little more sensitive lately. Could you please keep an eye on her? If anything comes up, please let me know." The teacher looked at me with understanding. "Of course, Sarah. I've noticed she's been quieter too. I'll pay close attention." I also asked for a letter confirming who regularly handles Lily's drop-offs and pickups. The teacher agreed, though it had to go through a school procedure. I nodded and thanked her. That night, after Lily was asleep, I sat alone in the kitchen, opening my expense notebook. Not to complain, but to itemize our needs again. I had to face reality. If I was going to leave this marriage, I had to know how to survive. Sometimes I was so tired I wanted to cry. But then I would remember Lily, remember how she pleaded, "Mommy, don't open it," and I would swallow my tears back down. I couldn't fall apart, because if I did, my daughter would be forced to be strong. And a child should not have to be strong in that way. That night, as I passed Lily's room, I saw her sleeping on her side. Her hand was still on her pillow, as if guarding something unseen. I watched her for a moment and then whispered to myself in my heart, "He who sows the wind will reap the whirlwind." But the storm must come at the right time and in the right way to topple those who feel they stand above everything. The hearing resumed after a short break. I returned to the respondent's chair. My back was straight, but my shoulders felt heavy. Outside, the sun was still shining, but inside the courtroom, the white fluorescent lights made everything seem pale. As if human emotions had been filtered out, leaving only paper and words. Mark sat across from me, calm. He didn't look at me. He looked towards the judge. His gaze was confident, like someone who was already prepared. I knew his side had not only prepared documents but also a narrative to trap me. His lawyer stood, opening a thick file, his voice as flat as if reading a report. "Your Honor, we request that the respondent's parenting capacity be thoroughly considered. The respondent has no steady job, no income, is poor at managing finances, her living environment is disorderly, and most importantly, the respondent shows signs of emotional instability." He said the words emotional instability so lightly, but they felt like a slash. I gripped my hands under the chair, holding myself back. The lawyer presented several color photographs. A photo of a messy corner of the kitchen, some dirty dishes, a pot of soup tilted on the stove. I was shocked. That was my kitchen. It was true. But that was the day Lily had a fever. I had been running back and forth, holding her. A chaotic moment on an emergency day was now being portrayed as proof of routine disorder. Next was a voice recording. My voice on it sounded hoarse and faltering. "I want to disappear from here." It was a recording of me calling Jessica, complaining that I was so tired and didn't know what to do. My voice at that time did sound weak and desperate. But it was not proof that I was an incapable mother. It was the cry of someone who was cornered. The lawyer concluded briefly. "With this psychological condition, we are concerned the respondent is not stable enough to raise a child long term." Then he moved on to finances. He read out numbers, detailing Mark's income, the assets in his name, and emphasized that I had no economic contribution. Every word felt like a slap. Then it was Mark's turn to speak. He stood up, straightening his collar. His voice was deep and calm. He spoke of a father's responsibility, of his desire to provide the best environment for his child, of how it pained him to bring his wife to court, but it was all for Lily's future. He looked at the judge, then glanced at me briefly. That look contained no love, only pity, as if I were a burden. He added, as a final, gentle blow, "I don't intend to take away her rights as a mother. But she is often emotional, cries frequently, and it scares our child. I'm afraid if Lily lives with her, she will become unstable too." Hearing that, my heart went cold. He had cut me off from the role of a wife, from any term of endearment, and turned me into an object in a case file. Then the court asked for Lily's opinion. My daughter was brought in, wearing a small cream-colored dress, her hair in neat pigtails. Seeing her stand in the middle of the courtroom, so small among the adults, I wanted to run and hug her, take her out of there. But I could only sit still. The judge asked, his voice firm but not too loud. Lily, can you tell me, who do you want to live with? Just be honest. Lily lifted her head, her eyes darting to her father, then resting on me. I saw her lips press tightly together, her hands twisting the hem of her dress. She took a breath. Her voice was small but clear. I want to live with my mom. My heart felt like it was being pulled. A part of me was overjoyed, another part terrified. Because I knew the other side wouldn't just let it be. And I was right. Mark's lawyer stood up immediately. Your Honor, the child is only 7 years old. At her age, she is easily influenced by emotions and dependent on her primary caregiver. Her statement does not reflect the best parenting conditions. We urge that material factors and long-term stability be considered. Mark also added, in a perfectly measured tone. She's just a child, she loves her mother, so she says that. But I can guarantee her future. I looked at Lily, saw her look down, her shoulders trembling slightly. She was being pulled back and forth by adult words she didn't fully understand. She only knew to choose the person who made her feel safest. The judge asked me, Sarah, do you have any comments regarding the conditions of child-rearing? I stood up. I spoke clearly, trying not to tremble. Your Honor, I am the one who has cared for Lily since she was born. I don't deny that I don't have a steady job yet, but I am looking and I have a clear plan. What I ask to be considered is the emotional bond and the psychological safety of the child. She is still young, she needs her mother. The opposing lawyer immediately objected, bringing up more trivial details. Shopping receipts, a recording of me on the phone with a friend at night. All my complaints were woven into a story that I couldn't control my emotions. I listened and I understood. They didn't need me to be actually wrong. They just needed me to look wrong. The judge took notes, his expression serious. I couldn't read his mind. I just felt that in this courtroom, everyone had a role. The lawyer as the speaker, my husband as the actor, and me as the object being dissected. The hearing was not over. The judge called for another break. I sat down, my palms wet with cold sweat. I watched Lily being led out by an officer. She turned and looked at me. Her eyes full of fear and pleading. I bit my lip, reminding myself. A straight tree is not afraid to stand tall, but a straight tree also needs roots. My roots right now were evidence, calm, and the necessity to stand tall so my daughter could see me. I didn't know what was going through Mark's mind then, but I knew he was very confident. And sometimes, people who are too confident get careless. I took a slow breath, keeping myself from falling. This was the peak of humiliation. But it was not the end of everything. During the break, I was led to a corridor outside the courtroom. The space was larger, but the chill was still palpable. I sat on a long bench, leaning against the wall, trying to calm my breathing. Mr. Chen sat beside me. He didn't speak right away, giving me a few minutes to compose myself. I looked at my hands, there were still nail marks where I had gripped them too tightly. After a moment, Mr. Chen whispered, Sarah, you need to be mentally prepared. Based on what they presented, the scales are heavily tipped against us. I looked up, my eyes stinging. How bad is it, sir? He didn't sugarcoat it. They have a stable income, a house in his name, and a narrative to damage your psychological image. In many cases, courts tend to prioritize material conditions if the other party cannot prove minimum resources. You have love, but sometimes love isn't enough to win on paper. My ears were ringing. I knew he was being honest. I asked in a hoarse voice, so what do I do? I can't lose my child. Mr. Chen looked at me intently, then said quietly, you still have a trump card, but it has to be played at the right moment. I knew he was talking about the video. My heart pounded, but I was still scared. Scared that if we played it, they would turn it around, accuse me of fabricating it, scared something would go wrong. Before I could speak, I heard a man's voice from a distance. Mark was talking to his lawyer, a faint smile on his face. His voice was just loud enough to carry. The smile of someone who feels they've already won. I didn't hear what he said, but his calmness made my blood boil. I looked down, feeling like I was standing in front of a high wall. Just when I felt I couldn't take it anymore, a small hand touched mine. I turned. Lily was standing there, brought by an officer. She looked at me, her eyes red but not crying. She came closer, tugged on my sleeve, and whispered. Just loud enough for me to hear. Mommy, I have a secret. I was stunned. I bent down. What secret, sweetie? Lily glanced around quickly, then brought her mouth to my ear. I want to talk to the judge. I want to show him something that you don't know about. Hearing the words that you don't know about, my heart felt like it stopped. I looked at my daughter for a long time. This little child, who had been trembling in the courtroom just moments ago, was now taking the initiative to speak. I felt pity and fear all at once. I asked softly, "Are you sure? You're not scared?" Lily shook her head, but her lips were trembling. She swallowed and then said something that pierced my heart. "I'm scared, but I'm more scared of losing you." I pulled her into a hug. I didn't let my tears fall, because if I cried, she would back down. I just kissed her hair and said softly, "All right, just tell the truth. Mommy's right here." Mr. Chen, who had overheard our conversation, came closer. He looked at Lily, his voice gentle, but clear. "Lily, whatever you want to tell the judge, just tell him exactly what you know. You don't have to speak loudly, just be honest." Lily nodded, her hand gripping the edge of my dress tightly. I felt her palm was cold. Across the corridor, Mark was still deep in conversation. He wasn't paying attention to us. Maybe he thought Lily was just a little kid who would say a few sentences and be done. Maybe he thought everything was already on paper and forgot that sometimes the truth resides in the heart and words of a child. I looked at Mr. Chen. He gave a slight nod, as if giving a signal. "It's time." I took a deep breath. An old saying came to mind, "Joys and sorrows are born together." But I didn't want my daughter to bear sorrows with me. I wanted her to live as a child, completely. But it was she who held the key to unlocking the door to justice. An officer called everyone back in. I held Lily's hand. When we returned to our places, the atmosphere in the courtroom was incredibly tense. I felt everyone's eyes on Lily. She stood beside me, her body small, but her back was straighter than before. The judge looked at Lily. "Is there anything else you'd like to say?" Lily took a breath, her voice trembling but clear. "Excuse me, Your Honor. May I tell a secret that even my mom doesn't know?" The entire room went silent. Mark turned his head quickly. For the first time, I saw his expression change. Not just confused, but shocked. Like someone hearing a key turn in a door they thought was securely locked. He stood up. "I object, Your Honor. She's a child." The judge banged his gavel. "Please be seated. Let the child speak." Lily glanced at me, then pulled something out of the small bag she was carrying. An object I knew all too well, the old tablet with the cracked screen. I saw it, my heart pounding, but I remained silent. I just squeezed her hand tighter. Lily held up the tablet with both hands, as if holding something heavy and sacred. "Excuse me, sir. May I play this?" The courtroom was still silent. Mark stood frozen, his face pale. For the first time during the entire hearing, the man who was always so composed showed panic. And I knew the tide was about to turn. Lily stood beside me, both hands holding the old tablet as if it were a fragile thing. She was so small that anyone looking at her would think a single harsh word would be enough to make her cry. But strangely, her gaze was no longer that of a child being pulled back and forth. It was the gaze of a child who had been afraid for too long and had decided not to be afraid anymore. The judge looked at the tablet and then turned to me. "Sarah, did you know your child brought this?" I answered honestly. "Your Honor, I did not know she was bringing it here. I only know she has a recording of something she heard." Mark stood up quickly, his voice strained. "Your Honor, this could be fabricated. A child is easily influenced. I request that this not be played." His lawyer also stood, pleading with the court to consider the legality of the evidence. The judge banged his gavel, his voice firm. "Be seated. The admissibility of evidence is at the discretion of the court. If this child wishes to show something, the court will allow it. If your party believes it is fake, you have the right to request a forensic analysis." The tension in the room thickened. Lily looked at the judge politely. "Sir, I only recorded what I saw. I don't know what fabrication is." That innocent statement pierced my heart. The judge signaled for a court technician to take the tablet. The technician approached, whispered to Lily, and then took it carefully. Lily was still holding onto my dress, her hand cold. I squeezed her hand gently, as if telling her, "Breathe, stay with me." The tablet was connected to a large screen in the courtroom. The screen lit up. The whole room seemed to darken as all eyes focused on it. Mark sat back down, but I could see the stiffness in his shoulders. He stared at the screen as if looking at a monster about to devour him. The video played. The image was a little shaky, the angle low, the light dim, and then that familiar voice came through. Mark's voice, speaking, not acting. I won't repeat every word, because the more I heard, the drier my throat became. But there were sentences that made the entire courtroom freeze. Mark's voice talking about documents and strategy. Another woman's voice talking about severing my connection with our child. And the worst part. Mark's voice, planning to build a narrative that I had psychological problems, even planning to have Lily lie. The courtroom was dead silent. Someone in the back row covered their mouth. Someone gasped. I heard the court reporter's pen moving faster. Lily stood still, but I could feel her body trembling. She didn't look at the screen. She looked down, as if hearing her father's voice say those words again was painful enough. Mark stood up again. This time, he could no longer maintain his composure. Stop it. Stop it. This is slander. It's edited. The judge waved a hand, his voice firm. Sit down. The court will hear all of it. Mark froze, then sank into his chair, defeated. His face was contorted. The video ended, the screen went dark. For a few seconds, the room remained silent. A silence more terrifying than noise, because it felt like the truth had just landed, so heavy that no one dared to breathe. The judge asked directly, Mr. Johnson, what is your explanation for the contents of this recording? Mark stood, opened his mouth, then fell silent. He swallowed. Your Honor, that recording is edited. I didn't say those things. Maybe someone used AI, or some other technology. Whispers filled the room. Mr. Chen stood. Your Honor, we ask that this be entered as evidence recorded by the child herself. We are prepared for a forensic analysis to verify its authenticity if necessary. Its contents show intent to fabricate evidence and manipulate a child's testimony. This is an extremely serious matter in a child custody dispute. The judge nodded and then turned to the technician. The technician checked for a moment and then reported, the file shows a recording time consistent with the device's memory. There are no signs of direct editing on this device. That single sentence was enough to make my legs feel steady again. I no longer felt alone. The truth had just placed its hand on my shoulder. The judge looked at Mark, his voice heavy. Do you understand what you were just heard saying in that recording? Regardless of your claims, the court notes a significant irregularity, especially the intent to influence a child's psychology and fabricate evidence. This is no longer a private matter between husband and wife. It directly concerns the welfare and mental safety of a child. Mark stood there, his face ashen. He was no longer smirking, no longer straightening his collar. He just looked like a man whose mask had just been ripped off in front of a crowd. I looked down at Lily. She was still holding my dress, but her hand was no longer trembling. I stroked her hair and whispered, "You were so brave." Lily looked up, her eyes wet. "Mommy, don't leave me." I shook my head, my lips pressed tight to hold back tears. "I will never leave you. I'm right here." When I said those words, I no longer felt like a helpless woman in the respondent's chair. I was still afraid, but that fear had changed its shape. It was no longer the fear of being trampled, but the fear of doing something that would hurt my daughter. And when the goal is your child, you become stronger. The judge noted the request for forensic analysis and continued the hearing. An officer escorted Lily out to rest. She walked slowly, looking back at me one more time. I gave her a small nod, a promise without words. In the courtroom, the gazes of the people who had previously scrutinized me had now changed. It wasn't pity, nor was it judgment. It was the look of people who had just witnessed a piece of truth they never expected. As for Mark, he sat with his back no longer straight. He stared blankly at the table, like a man who had just lost the one thing he believed in most: control of the narrative. I took a deep breath. A saying echoed in my mind, no matter how high a squirrel jumps, it eventually falls. The fire had been exposed, and the entire room had just seen it. After the video, the courtroom was no longer the same. No one looked at me as an unstable, dependent woman anymore. Because in a matter of minutes, the truth had done what 1,000 defenses could not. It tore off the mask. The judge adjourned the hearing to record the request for forensic analysis. The judge also emphasized that the content of the recording, showing intent to manipulate a child's psychology and fabricate evidence, would be considered with extreme seriousness. At that point, Mark could no longer sit calmly. His face was stiff, his eyes vacant. Mr. Chen turned to me and whispered, "Speak for the final part, ma'am. Short. Clear. Don't let emotion take over." I stood up one last time. This time, my legs were still shaking, but they were no longer weak. I looked straight at the judge, my voice steady. "Your Honor, I don't deny that I was in a financially vulnerable position because I chose to stay home and raise my child. But I never thought of using my child as a tool to win or lose. The most painful thing is that my daughter had to witness a conversation far beyond her years, and she was so terrified that she had to record it herself just to feel safe." I paused, swallowed, and then continued. I plead with the court to place Lily's true best interests above all else. She needs an environment that is not threatening, not controlled by material things, and not dragged into the deceitful plans of adults. I am only asking for permission to be a mother and to protect her. I didn't bring up my sacrifices, nor did I complain. I just said what the court needed to hear, the truth and the child's best interests. The judges conferred briefly on the bench. While waiting, I sat with my hands on my knees. Then the judge read the temporary order. The court granted me temporary custody of Lily during the further investigation, especially regarding the video's content and the indication of perjury in the legal process. Visitation from Mark's side was permitted according to the rules, but initially had to be supervised to ensure the child's psychological stability. I heard every word, my eyes stinging. I didn't cry. I just bowed my head deeply, as if in thanks, as if I had just released a massive weight from my chest. Mark stood up to protest. I'm her father. I have rights. The judge looked at him squarely, his voice firm. You have rights as a father, but those rights do not permit you to threaten, manipulate, or fabricate evidence that harms her mother. The court prioritizes the safety and stability of the child. Mark was silenced. For the first time, I saw him silenced by the very things he had used to pressure me, law and logic. After the hearing, I did not return to that 3-story house. I knew I was no longer safe there. I rented a small studio apartment near Lily's school. It wasn't spacious, but its window faced a neighbor's lush bougainvillea. It was warm. I started over. During the day, I worked at a diner owned by an acquaintance. I helped in the kitchen, served customers, worked the cash register. I learned again how to stand for hours, learned again how to smile at strangers, learned again how to earn my first paycheck after so many years. The pay wasn't great, but I felt like I was living on my own 2 feet. At first, Lily still woke up startled in her sleep. One day, while I was washing dishes, she ran and hugged my waist tightly. You're not going to leave, right, Mommy? I put down the plate, turned around, and hugged her. Mommy works, and then Mommy comes home. Mommy isn't going anywhere. I never taught her to hate her father. I only taught her one thing: if you're scared, you have to speak up. As for Mark, he didn't give up immediately. He called, sent texts, sometimes pleading, sometimes threatening. I never engaged. I forwarded all the evidence to Mr. Chen. The woman from the video also tried to show up at Lily's school once, but the school, which I had already informed, immediately asked her to leave. When they could no longer easily get to Lily, they started to panic. The authorities began investigating related matters, the transferred funds, the threatening messages, and especially the indication of influencing a child's testimony. The process wasn't short, but I saw clearly. When you walk on the right path, wrongdoing will show its own tail. Over time, Mark's situation worsened. He no longer had the aura of a winner. From someone who always said, "Let me handle it," he fell to a position of having to give explanations and face the consequences of his own games. At the next hearing, when the verification results were presented, he could no longer deny it. He could only say, "I was just afraid of losing my child." Mr. Chen replied briefly but sharply, "Fear of losing your child does not give you a license to use your child as a tool." Finally, the court issued its final ruling. I was granted full custody of Lily. Mark had visitation rights according to the rules, but they had to be phased in gradually with supervision, to ensure Lily's psychological well-being. That day, hearing the final verdict, I no longer felt like I had nothing. I had a job, a place to live, evidence, and most importantly, I had my child. Sometime later, Mark requested to see Lily according to the schedule. The meeting was held at a supervised counseling center. I brought my daughter, her hand clutching mine tightly. Mark sat there, his face thinner. When he saw his daughter, he looked down for a long time. He whispered, "Lily, Daddy is sorry." Lily didn't run to hug him like she used to. She stood still, looked at him for a moment, and then turned to me. I gave a slight nod. Only then did she whisper back, "Daddy, don't say mean things about Mommy anymore, okay?" That simple sentence was like a slap to an adult. Mark was choked up, unable to say anything. On the way home, Lily sat in the back of the car, leaned forward, and wrapped her arms around my shoulders. She whispered, "Mommy, I can sleep better now." Hearing that, my eyes felt hot. I hadn't become richer, nor had I won with a flourish. But I had won back the most precious thing for a mother: the right to be with her child in peace and with dignity. In this life, there are things we must remember.